What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Tuesday edition of On Q. Rich Quinones is here. Don't forget to check us out on the YouTube channel, Rich Q on Q. Follow me on social media platforms, Spotify, Apple, Buzzsprout, and of course, part of 1029 The Game, Broad Street South, and our good friends down there in Miami, Florida, Leon Media Network. All right, so 11 weeks of the NFL in the books. We capped it off, big win, albeit a sloppy one last night in that Monday Night Affair, Kansas City and the Eagles besting Kansas City 21-17. Our good friend Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029 The Game in Broad Street South, at Lloyd Vance on X, kind enough to join us. And let me start by saying this. I think maybe the Kansas City Chiefs probably should address their lack of offensive weapons, notably the wide receiver position in the offseason. If not, then certainly the trade deadline. It came back to bite them in the butt late last night. And listen, say what you want about the Eagles, C type of game if we're going to average Lloyd, but ultimately you let a team like that hang around, they're going to bite you in the ass, and that's exactly what the Eagles did last night.
Yeah, Q, and you and I had talked about the conditions going into this
Yeah.
game when we did our preview, and the rain and the cold had something to do with it, but you cannot uh, give that as an excuse for the
Mm-hmm.
way the receivers for Patrick Mahomes played in this game. And you could see his frustration. And Q, you go back to last offseason, Brett Veach, who's their general manager, Andy Reid is their head coach, obviously. They won the Super Bowl after they replaced Tyreek Hill. So they were like, okay, we'll get Kadarius Toney going, and
Yep.
they drafted Kid Rice. But it's just not working for them. That drop at the end of the game obviously was just huge. Marquez Valdez-Scantling probably should have caught that, and that would have put him on a doorstep to win the game. A game that Kansas City dominated when you look at all the metrics, and they had 23 first downs to the Eagles 16, 336 total yards to the Eagles 236. They even outrushed the Eagles, which was very surprising to me. We talked about Pacheco needing to get going
Mm-hmm.
and Swift as well in this one. Kansas City had 168 rush yards to the Eagles, only 114. And in time of possession, about 32 for Kansas City, Philly only 27. But the key one, as we always talk about, Q, on the scoreboard, they got it done, and the Eagles move on 9-1, number one seed.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tale of two halves. I mean, the offensive line was getting dominated last night. Philly was. Uh, I'll get into some of the miscues, but think about this in the second half. Kansas City's possessions, punt, punt, fumble, punt, punt, downs. Obviously, they couldn't convert late in the game. You had the questionable call as well that backed them up. Desperation fourth down attempt that should have been caught. Travis Kelce, inexplicably, again, the drops. I'm waiting for these guys that just go down once they catch the football. As soon as he turns inside, you just know that a strip fumble is coming. Jalen Hurts, right? 23-2 now in his last 25 regular season starts. I didn't think it was the cleanest game played, but again, you're letting a team hang around. Kansas City gift wrapped that game. It was a tale of two halves. They gift wrapped that game. I thought one of the turning points, I didn't hear a lot of people talk about it, and I didn't hear Buck and Aikman talk about it after the game as well, was the fact that Andy Reid, we say, the Hall of Fame coach, 30-7, coming off the bye, covering the spread, this and that, knows exactly what he's doing. But you've got a 4th and 4 on the Eagles 39-yard line. What are we doing? The analytics say go for it, especially with a Hall of Fame quarterback. Make a play, pick up a couple yards. Instead, they punt. And that was pretty much going into the locker room down 21-17. That was an opportunity right there. I thought the refs did miss a blatant late hit out of bounds prior to the Mahomes pick in the red zone. That could have changed the tide. To Kelce fumble, the miscues. It was just a sloppily played second half. And I was shocked that Kansas City and Spagnuolo, they didn't keep pressuring Hurts even in the third and fourth quarter. And they didn't go back to running the football, which they were able to do with success. So all around, you have to give the Eagles credit, as you alluded to, because you just get out of there with a W. I mean, they had no business winning that game, period. But good to great teams figure out a way to win. I'm more concerned about Kansas City, their offensive issues. And again, 4th and 4 from the 39. You have to go for it if you're Andy Reid.
Yeah, Q, I was just shaking my head at that point. And not only did they punt it into the end zone. So
That's
you
right.
lose the net yardage there, and
Yep.
the Eagles,
Good
you know,
point.
they stole all the momentum right there, as you said, and they went right down the field. Hurts gets his second rushing touchdown of the game. And when you tell Hurts, he is a winner. You know, when you look at his passing stats, yeah, nothing to write home about. 14 to 22, 150 yards. He did have that bad interception where him and AJ Brown were on the
Yep.
same page. But he reminds me just so much of like Steve McNair. He's a winner. He knows how to get it done in these key situations. He wills his team to win victory. 12 rushes, 29 yards, and it was two TDs I talked about. But Q, early on, as you said, Spagnuolo was doing a great job against him. He was sacked 5 times, most of it in that first half, and he just weathered the storm. And credit to the Eagles defense, as you pointed out when we first came on, they got them off of the
Yep.
field. Kansas City, in terms of third downs, this will tell you they were 8 for 17 on third downs. Just terrible. They couldn't get it done. 2 for 3 on fourth down. We talked about the drops on fourth down as well. But the Eagles were struggling on third down as well, 3 for 11. So Spagnuolo had the plan. It's 17-7 at the half. They get the Butker field goal right before the half, and then they just go into a shell. And we've seen this the
Yeah.
last couple weeks with them. Over in Germany, they said, okay, maybe jet lag. They held on to get the win against Miami. But this time, Q, they didn't do anything in the second half, and they're only averaging like 6 points in the second half for their season. So something's amiss here. Obviously, we can talk about the receivers, Kelsey getting old and making mistakes, but you know, it's a tough watch for the defending Super Bowl champions.
Yeah, and I'm wondering too. I mean, look, talking about retirement, the relationship with Taylor Swift, the distractions, the going away on the bye, all that other stuff. I mean, it's just bad. It wasn't sound football by Kansas City. And also to your point, I thought going into the game, I thought the Eagles had an opportunity to run the football. I thought it was going to be a trenches game. You get Swift 25 plus touches. I think he finished with 18, ran the ball hard. Kansas City's run defense over the last several weeks, they're averaging about a $150 plus. So the Eagles were able to take advantage of that. And you're right, Hurts's numbers don't have to be gaudy. But again, all he does is win. So Kansas City goes back to the drawing board. Eagles a nice win on the road. By the way, this just came down about 45 minutes ago. It was announced that the Steelers have fired their offensive coordinator, Matt Canada. According to multiple reports, head coach Mike Tomlin said it was his and only his decision. The players find out on their own, just like, quote, the rest of us. And listen, this is a rarity because how many times have the Pittsburgh Steelers made any type of head coaching change, let alone coordinator change during the middle season in the history of the franchise? I think, I think it's beyond rare. I don't even know if this is the first time. I'd have to double check. But with that being said, there's a major disconnect going on. I thought Kenny Pickett was going to take that progression in that second year with Pickens, and he stinks right now. Pickett does. I mean, their offense, they can't muster any offense. I mean, they're doing it with smoke and mirrors. I did have them to be a playoff team coming out of the AFC North. I mean, by smoke and mirrors right now, losing that game to Cleveland, they couldn't muster up any offense. They're still there, right, in the hunt when you think about it, but offensively, they just cannot put together sustained drives. I mean, you watch this team and they don't have playmakers. So I pulled it up. So the Steelers did this. So it marks the first time the Steelers have made a head coaching or coordinator change midseason since 1941. That's incredible. But again, offensively, Lloyd, 17 points a game. They're averaging about 300 yards per play, 4.9. The red zone efficiency is 52%. First down percentage is 37. Those are all bottom. I mean, they rank pretty much like what the Giants are. I mean, one of the worst and the Jets, one of the worst offensive teams. So do you put the blame on the play calling? Do you put it on Canada, or do you just put it on the fact that maybe that quarterback's not really good and he just hasn't taken that next step?
After a while, all the fingers are pointing out, and these coaches, they're always looking for their not their fall guy, but they're looking for the individual and say, okay, we could say it was him. Let's jettison him. This must be enough week. because you and I talked about Zach Wilson. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute. The Jets, they said enough with him. Tim Boyle comes in. And the Steelers, same kind of thing. Mike Tomlin was cutting off his nose despite his face, defending Matt Canada. The offense just was not working the way it needed to. Najee Harris does not look like the same player. He wasn't getting him the football, and he was kind of griping about it.
Yep.
To their credit, they have gotten Jalen Warren going at the running back position. He's running the ball very well. But Pickett, the key guy, as you pointed out, he is just not playing well. That was a tough watch. I watched a lot of that game with Cleveland. Yes, if you like defense, great defensive battle. Both those defenses can get after the quarterback. But in terms of quarterback play, you had Pickett on one side, not doing much, and then DTR, the young rookie, making his first start, not doing much for the Browns. But, the Steelers are going to try to hang in there. They have the Steelers way. I always talk to somebody within their organization, and he said, the Steelers and the Rooney family, it's all about consistency. They didn't want to do it, as you said. It's just been so long, but they have the opportunity. They're still in the mix. If the playoffs start today, they'd be the 7th seed. They're 6-4. Pickett was the only quarterback taken in the first round a couple of years ago, and we were like, it was kind of quarterback deficient class, and he was right there on their doorstep as a guy playing for the University of Pittsburgh, but he was probably more like a second, third round pick. And we'll see if he's able to pick it up at the end here. They're at Cincinnati. They have Arizona, New England at Colts, which will be a kind of playoff eliminator. Cincinnati, who we know they lost their quarterback, at Seattle, and then they finish at Baltimore. So some winnable games there, but the Steelers cannot just rely on their defense.
Daniel Jones was on Kay Adams's pod and said that he's having ACL surgery tomorrow in New York. That was via the Up and Adams show. So we saw DeVito played well against Washington. Giants got a much needed win. The kid made plays. Good for him. Listen, he might carve out a 4 or 5 years of backup. Who knows? It'll be interesting when we get to your Lackey and game balls. But with that being said, the flip side is Washington, right? This is what I'm hearing. There's some grumblings now if they lose against the Dallas Cowboys, and they're big dogs in that game, but if they lose against the Dallas Cowboys on Thursday, that we might see the end of Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio. Not Eric Bieniemy, but Rivera and Jack Del Rio. I thought Howe had a rough game. I thought the Giants defense came to play. And credit to Brian Daboll because he was under fire. We talked a little bit about this last week on BYP, and they stepped up. So players rallied around him, right? And that's where I kind of dismiss and debate the whole tanking, right? The origins of tanking in the NFL. You get stuff on film. Players are trying to they're trying to hit their incentives. They're trying to, go into the offseason, free agents, looking for money, looking for a contract. They're just not going to roll over like that. Sure, they'll make business decisions, but the bottom line is I don't really subscribe to the theory of tanking in the NFL. With that being said, Washington right now, man, do you see a scenario if they just roll over and don't show up on Thanksgiving against Dallas and get waxed 35-10? Do you believe Rivera and Del Rio will be out Friday over the weekend, long weekend, or do you think they're going to be out regardless when the season ends?
Well, Q, I definitely believe that a change is coming in season. I don't know if it'll be after this weekend, but obviously all the national eyes are going to be them. It's a big Thanksgiving game, and everybody watches Dallas on Thanksgiving, and it was just such a poor effort that Washington put forth there in terms of they're just kind of losing discipline. They're just.
Yeah.
I think they thought they could roll the football out there, and the Giants kind of roll over. We know the Giants are kind of downtrodden. But the Giants are ready for a fight. As you said, in the NFL, no team is just going to say, I'm tanking,
Right.
So they went out there. And the thing is for Rivera, everybody's like, he was so stoic and cleaned up so much of the mess with Daniel Snyder. Well, Snyder's gone now, and you have Joshua Harris who's looking at everything. Q, we talked about this way back when the season started. Bieniemy is the coach in waiting for this team. So I think maybe they give him the last 6 games or so to kind of see could he be the head man there if this goes awry. So yeah, they're on a very hot seat there.
So you said coach in waiting, and then, with 6, handful of games left.
Mhm.
I still believe, depending upon what happens in New England and Harbaugh, Michigan, there's going to be the retreads that we're going to see. I don't know how much of this you put a check mark next to Bieniemy because of how Hal played. I think it was just the Giants defense came to play and the kid made some poor decisions in the game. It happened. You kind of write it off. I still think he's going to be a solid starter in this league and maybe for Washington, but I just don't understand again. What's the benefit if they get blown out? It's almost like the Jets with Robert Saleh. Like, what's the benefit of having these coaches finish out the season when you really think about it, right? I mean, you want to try to clean things up, and there, I don't believe it's a toxic locker room in Washington. I believe by all accounts, Rivera, Del Rio, they're good guys, but they're just not getting it done from a coaching and coordinator standpoint. I just don't see the benefit of keeping these guys around. I think if you're going to do anything, I don't see them winning this game against the Dallas Cowboys. I really don't. I think they're a shot team. I think the confidence is shot. I think they're a mistake-prone team. I think Dallas is going to friggin' ransack them, to be quite honest with you. And I just don't see the benefit of keeping these guys around if they were to lose a game 35-10.
Yes, and we're coming to that last part of the season. You know, it's a long season. It's 17 games, 18 weeks.
Mhm.
And at a certain point, the ownership and the front office going to say enough's enough. Yeah, they want to turn the page, get ready for the next season. And
Yeah.
some of these coaches, you know, you don't want to root for them to lose their job, but some of them
No.
are dead man walking. You can totally see it. Robert Saleh, as you pointed out, like I've said over and over again, this move bringing Boyle in his desperation is done way too late. You had Brandon Staley who went off on the media
I want to get into that
after
too.
his debacle. He's done too.
Yep.
And you're right. Ron Rivera, he's done a great job. Everybody looks up to him around National Football League, but he may be one of the coaches next. So Q, you know, it just depends when they want to turn the page and do they want to tear it all down to the studs, you know what I mean? Or do they want to keep portions of the team, particularly the quarterback, and build for the future? But we all know Drake May's out there and Caleb Williams.
Week 11 in the book, short week, Thanksgiving right around the corner, 3 slate of games will advance kind enough to join us. This edition of On Q, Rich Quinones here at Rich Q on Q YouTube channel, Rich Q on Q. You mentioned Staley, and I think the problem here is it just reminds me of what Joe Judge was doing towards the end of his horrible tenure, if we want to say cup of coffee with the Giants. You've got a head coach in Staley, and I think we also have to start to criticize the quarterback who's talented but makes a substantial amount of mistakes. I mean, what does he really run? One, when we think about it, but to your point, I think where ownership and Staley, they're not on the same page. Is you lose the game, fine, okay. You lose another close game, 23-20. I mean, I feel as though it's like the last several years, the Chargers lose games by 1, 2, 3 points. Jordan Love beats them late, but to stand up there or even the day after, and the comments when he was pushed about the play calling and you don't answer to the fans, you do. They pay the salaries. Like you never, just like in media, right? We don't go after the fans on the radio or on television. You don't do that. Your listeners, you don't go after them, right? You can be combatant in a debate, fine. But he's basically saying, you know, I don't answer them. But that's why you have press conferences. That's why you have post-game press conferences. That's why you have, as a fan, we want to know the inner workings, what's going on, you know, because we're not going to drive an hour, 2, 3 hours to go to the game, park, buy tickets, get merchandise, drink beer, have food, and spend a Sunday afternoon if we're not invested. So for him to say that, I mean, right there and then, I would have fired him. I would have fired him after the loss. I would have fired him last year. But when you say something like that, and ownership, we already know is cheap. They've got their own issues. I would have fired him right there and then.
And you know, the Spanos family, as you said, they own this team for a long time. And I don't think they want to pay a coach who's not on the field for them. But Staley is just his calling card was defense, right? He's supposed to be a defensive genius. And this team over and over, Q, they fall apart at the end of the games. And I'm watching this game and I'm like, this is Jordan Love. Come on. Like, you know, the Packers
That's a good point.
are they're just not a good team. And the Chargers couldn't get it done there, falling apart. And then you're seeing their head coach just lash out at people. And reminds me almost like that famous Mike Singletary one when he was going down the drain with the Niners,
Can't
where
have
he's
it.
yelling and screaming at everybody, can't use them, don't want them, and all this stuff. And it's just a toxic environment. So, you feel bad for the players, but change is needed. And there's one other one that we forgot, and this was probably the game of the week. You had Matt Eberflus and the
Detroit and
Bears.
Chicago.
That was my survivor pool special. Too. I picked the Lions, saw the Lions going to kill them, and they blew a 14-point lead or so with about 3 minutes left in the game. And Eberflus has lost that team in
Yeah.
Chicago, another one where the change is coming. So all season we see about 6 changes, and I agree with you. Some of these coaches are out.
And that's a good win because Jared Goff played poorly. That's a good win for the Lions. He played poorly until that last drive, where again, looking like an MVP candidate, slinging all over the place. That's a nice win for the Detroit Lions. I mean, these teams, like I said, San Fran, Dallas, Detroit, they're trying to keep pace with the Eagles. That's why that game, even though it was out of conference last night, big for Philadelphia, I still maintain Detroit's going to be there because of the strength of schedule. I think they have the benefit over the rest of these teams. We talked a little bit about that Thursday night affair as well. The Dolphins, got it going again. Dallas did what they need to do. I thought Jacksonville had a really nice bounce back, but I want to talk a little bit about the Texans for a moment and CJ Stroud, because going into the season, I thought maybe the Texans would be a 4-5, maybe if things broke 6-win team. You look at what transpired over the last several years. I believe it was Lovie Smith and David Culley, right? So you got
Yes,
two
yes.
African-American head coaches that were jettisoned by the Texans. DeMeco Ryans comes in. My fear was, hey, you're not going to have a lot of wiggle room here. If they have a down season with a rookie quarterback, maybe he's going to be out. But man, I'm telling you, he changed the whole culture of that franchise right now. And he's got a very good staff with him. But man, how about CJ Stroud? Like in a league where we're looking at some of these quarterbacks, and there's maybe a handful of quarterbacks that play at a very high level. How do you explain the emergence of this kid when you look at Richardson, who's banged up, where you look at Young, that's had some problems, where we look at some of these other quarterbacks over the last several years that, the field still loves, the Zach Wilsons, the Daniel Joneses, the inconsistency, the bad play. And here comes this young kid, and man, he's playing like an MVP. He's going to win Rookie of the Year, but he's playing like an MVP.
Yeah, Q. I want to say it's a misevaluation of him, but when we watch him at Ohio State, you're figuring, all right, he has Marvin Harrison Jr.,
Yeah.
Jackson Smith and Jigba and all that talent around him. You're like, okay, how really good is he? But when I watch him sling it, his mechanics, everything, he's not Mahomes, but he's Mahomes-esque in terms of the way he gets the football out of his hands and drives it down the field. And he's done a great job getting into Tank Dell and Schultz's tight end. Good win against Arizona. Obviously, it's Arizona, but when you look at Houston, this is a total shocker. This is the one, as you said, Q. You're like, wow, there's some surprises this season, and they're number one right now. There's a 6th seed. Down a stretch, we're really going to see. Actually, starting this week, they have Jacksonville this week in a huge game for the AFC South. We'll see if they're able to turn it around there. And then they have Denver at the Jets, at Tennessee, Cleveland, Tennessee, and then at Indianapolis
They can win
in a
8-9
playoff
games.
eliminator.
They can win
They
8-9
sure can.
games. Yeah.
And we always say it's the race to the 9-10 wins that is going to get you to that probably that 6-7 spot in the playoffs, and,
Well,
and they're
there you
going to be
go.
right there in the mix.
Plus the 7th spot, right? You had that added playoff
Oh yeah,
spot this year.
sure.
Yeah, right now. So Baltimore's the top seed in the AFC, Kansas City, then Jacksonville, Miami. So you look at the AFC 8-3, 7-3, and then coincidentally you look at the NFC. I mean, it's Philly is 9-1, and we can argue about them not playing a complete game. Detroit's 8-2. They had the big win against Kansas City to set the tone for the season. Thursday Night Football on the road. San Fran 7-3, Heckle and Jide, but we see what they do when all parts are firing. And then you look at the Dallas Cowboys at 7-3, and I can make the argument, could they really beat, right? I mean, so I still believe Detroit's going to be a player. San Fran's going to be a player. I mean, that game in a couple weeks between the Eagles and the 49ers, there's going to be a substantial amount at stake with that game. But the Eagles, just looking at their schedule going forward, they have Buffalo, San Fran, Dallas, Seattle. So you've got four really, really tough games. I hate to just kind of speculate here, but let's just say they go 2-2. That gets them to 11-3. Then they've got the Giants twice in Arizona. So, I mean, they're going to win their 13 games, and it's just a question
They
of
they should
yeah.
they should win this division. You know what I mean? They
Oh,
should
they're
win
going to
the
win the
division.
division, no doubt. But I'm saying top
Yeah,
seed in the
and
NFC.
then we kind of go from there. But Detroit's right behind them too. They're only one game behind the Eagles at 8-2. And I was just looking at both their schedules coming up, and you talk about that 4-game stretch for the Eagles. There's some tough games in there. They got to go to Dallas,
Yep.
and Seattle's tough too. So, and the Niners, I think the Niners, we don't want to say they're all the way back, but they put that 3-game loser streak behind them, and they look very strong the last couple weeks. I spot shattered them. So that, and then Detroit, real quick, they got Green Bay
Yep.
at New Orleans,
Yep.
at Chicago,
Yep.
Denver, who's kind of turned it around, at Minnesota,
They
at
can run the
Dallas.
table.
Yeah, and then they finished with Minnesota.
Yeah.
And we saw Minnesota, Josh Dobbs, nice story, but I think Detroit, they're a click better than them.
As I get my cord out of the way. Yeah, they can. I mean, listen, they should beat the Chargers, the Bears, Green Bay, the Saints, the Bears. That gets them now to 13-2. Denver, maybe a tricky spot. Minnesota, Dallas, a tricky spot. They're going to win 12, 13 games. Like, this is why I was saying it's so important. We're talking the in conference, not so much the outer conference, but, and I'll tell you, last thing the Eagles want to do is trip up against the Giants once or Arizona, teams that have nothing to play for, right? Nothing to play for. See, you would want a perfect world where you can rest some of these guys late.
Right.
The way it's shaping up, they're not going to have that benefit like in years past, where if they want to sit Hurts because they have everything locked up, or AJ Brown or Kelsey or Johnson. That's not going to be the case.
And they got to be careful too, Q, because we saw earlier this year they can stub their toe against a bad team. They lose to the Jets in a game where they had a ton of penalties and turnovers, and it was a good win, as we said last evening, but not a perfect win. This is a team that still has some flaws. That secondary, the ball can be moved against them. MVS was wide open there. That DB was beat. And in terms of the offense, you take AJ Brown out of the mix, and it's kind of interesting to see how Hurts plays after that. So, it's going to be a fun down the stretch run here, and it's almost like a horse race. And down the stretch they come. You know what I mean? And we're going to see, man. We're going to see.
Couple quickies for you, and then we'll wrap it up. Just real quick, just kind of glossing over Thanksgiving. Packers, Detroit. I told you, I think the Cowboys easily beat Washington. 49ers in Seattle is going to be the game watching because we don't know about the health of Geno Smith. But I think the Lions, if they blow out Green Bay, national TV for years, what did we all say? Get the Lions off Thanksgiving. I had no problem with poor little Detroit on Thanksgiving. It didn't bother me one bit, man, because to me, it's like, Thanksgiving Day, you put Detroit on, right? But if they blow out Green Bay and they showcase themselves on national TV, it stays in line with the keep them on Thanksgiving, but more importantly, first window, early game, 12:30, Fox, set the stage, here you go. And that's really good for Detroit. Now, if they turn around and they happen to stub their toe, that's a horrible loss because, again, it goes back to the potential of losing home field advantage.
Yeah, and I think this week they had to wake up call late. You know what I mean? And they said, oh, you know what? We're still an up and coming. They have a lot of talent on this team, but that defense, Aaron Glenn's group there, they still have some holes on that defense, particularly teams can, Justin Fields moving the football on them. So, they can't take anyone too lightly, but at 8-2, they are, like I said, only one game behind the Eagles, and they should take advantage of all these opportunities because the Eagles, they're getting wins, but sometimes you wonder, you're like, all right, the ball bounces another way. Particularly, they have a lot of turnovers. They're negative in turnover plus minus. The Eagles could lose some of these games, and these are tough ones coming up for the Eagles. Particularly, you got to start this week with the Buffalo Bills, who are a desperate team. We'll see which Bills show up, but Josh Allen, if he gets hot, he can put up some points.
Seattle and San Francisco. How about the way Seattle loses, right? I mean, the clock, just the clock management late in that game. I mean, you're talking about people, a Hall of Fame coach in Pete Carroll, and the sense of urgency late for Seattle in that game was not there, man. It just was not there. And I was a little surprised. I thought it was a bunch of coaching blunders. I know Geno Smith got banged up. Geno Smith signed that big deal, had a really nice comeback season, totally has regressed. He has not put up the type of numbers we thought, but that game squarely, that loss falls on Pete Carroll late.
Yeah, in Q, when you looked at this, when Geno Smith gets the elbow injury and Drew Lock comes in, I was like, oh, this game's over. But, to his credit, he got it out. He went out there and got his team in position. Unfortunately, a kicker missed the kick. It's they're a team, they're another up and down squad. You wonder which team's going to show up each week. I think that the Niners kind of have their number now. It's going to be interesting. In the next 3 weeks, the Niners are at Seattle,
Yep,
and then they're at Philly, and then they're
Yep.
back, and then they have Seattle back. So, we're really going to find out about this Seattle team. And as you said, their defense, no Adams and all that. I just wonder about coverage lapses for them. Yes. And then our offensive line as well, because you got to have Chase Young on the other side coming after Geno Smith.
Yeah, and short week again, Geno Smith dealing with that right elbow injury. All right. Game balls and Lackey. I'm going to tell you right now, I will be extremely disappointed if you don't give a little love to my guy, but who did you give the game ball to?
Well, we were texting, and I said, Tommy, put him in the trunk, Tommy DeVito. But I didn't give him my game ball. He did a great job. We killed him. We said he
You
was
gave it to him?
NFL ready, but I didn't give it to him. And you're going to be like, oh.
Hold on a second.
I
How
kinda
do you
picked a
not?
game.
How do you not give it to the passing paisan, the slinging Sicilian? How do you not give it to Veal Chop Tommy? Who'd you give it to?
All right, I gave it to a defense guy, and you're like, this was too easy. But I gave it to Cowboys pass rusher Micah Parsons, who was just dominant against the Carolina Panthers. I know it's the Panthers. He had 6 sacks. He had 2.5 sacks. Some are saying 3. Depends where you look at. The Cowboys sacked Young 5 times, and he had just had constant pressure on him. He was in the backfield over and over again. And as you said, you're really looking forward to seeing Micah Parsons on Thanksgiving. I think he may be the turkey leg guy right now. So I gave him the game ball. And there's always so many guys you can pick it. But yeah, Tommy did a great job.
Stick him in the trunk. I'm going to say the Lackey. Did it go to a quarterback?
No, it did not.
See, I don't think you gave it to a wide receiver based on one drop. You did. No, you like the back of my hand. Who got the Lackey this week? Was it last night?
It's Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Now, it wasn't just a drop Q. I went back. He had 0 receptions on 3 targets. And then that fourth quarter bomb right in his hands, he could have saved his team's game and everything, and he just dropped it. And he was another guy that he's just everybody else around him is the same thing. You know what I mean? All the other receivers, none of them want to step up. And that's going to be a big problem for Mahomes going into the playoffs. But definitely I gave it to him. And it's something they're going to have to fix in the offseason. But yeah, Marquez Valdes-Scantling gets my Lloyd's Lackey this week.
Let's just say our North Jersey crowd will not be happy with you. So watch yourself on the turnpike. So tonight, Tuesday night, Lloyd Vance Insider Football, 8:00 on 102.9.
Yeah, we're going to go at 8:00 this week on Tuesday night. We're going to go very heavy on the Eagles Chiefs game, and then we'll just go around the league and get everybody ready for Thanksgiving games.
All right. Any guest on tonight, or still booking as we speak?
Still booking as we speak. I mean, it'd just be me and Angel talking, reviewing everything. So looking forward to it. I got all my notes though. It really was a great week. It had a lot of excitement and a lot of twists and turns this week.
Yeah, I mean, the NFL season goes by ridiculously fast. So, all right, my friend, always appreciate you jumping on, and have a good Thanksgiving. Enjoy the slate of games. We'll be tuning in tonight, 8 o'clock, 102.9 The Game, Broad Street South. Lloyd Vance's Insider Football. Give him a follow on X as well, at Lloyd Vance. Appreciate him jumping on a Tuesday edition of On Cue. Thank you, pal.
Talk to you later.